Long before cities, before farming, before language fully formed into stories, the earth already belonged to giants. The landscape that early humans entered was not an empty wilderness waiting for intelligence to appear. It was an established system, ancient and efficient, where every movement carried meaning and every sound had consequence. Roughly 2 to 3 million years ago, Africa did not resemble the familiar open savannas often imagined today. It was a mosaic of environments shifting constantly with climate cycles. Dense woodlands blended into grasslands, wetlands expanded and vanished with seasonal rains, and rivers changed course over centuries. This instability shaped evolution. Creatures that survived here were not merely strong, they were adaptable, alert, and ruthless. Into this world stepped small primates walking upright. They were not yet fully human. Their bodies were narrow and fragile compared to the mammals surrounding them. Their teeth were dull, their claws non-existent, their speed unimpressive. They lacked fur thick enough to protect them from night cold, and their young were helpless for years after birth. In a purely physical comparison, they ranked near the bottom of the food hierarchy. Yet they survived. To understand why, one must first understand the danger they faced. Every habitat layer contained specialists evolved over millions of years before hominins ever appeared. In the trees lived ambush predators, perfectly designed for vertical hunting. In the grass lurked sprinting killers adapted to explosive attacks. Near water sources waited patience hunters capable of remaining motionless for hours before striking. And across open ground moved massive herbivores whose size alone made them deadly. For early humans, safety did not exist, only temporary absence of immediate threat. Night was the most dangerous time. Darkness did not simply limit vision, it transferred control of the world to creatures with senses far superior to human perception. Many predators hunted primarily at dusk or after sunset because their eyes gathered light efficiently, while early humans became nearly blind. Sleeping alone meant death. Even sleeping in groups was not secure. A rustle in grass could signal a stalking cat. A sudden silence of insects might indicate something approaching. The smell of carrion drifting through air could attract competitors far larger than any hominin group. Because of this, early human ancestors developed behaviors before they developed tools. They learned positioning, awareness, and cooperation long before mastering weapons. Groups chose sleeping locations carefully, often elevated or surrounded by difficult terrain. Individuals rarely wandered beyond hearing distance of others. Vocalizations likely evolved first as warning systems rather than communication of ideas. Sound carried survival value long before language carried meaning. Fear was not an emotion. It was a constant environmental condition. Water sources illustrate this clearly. Every animal needed water, which meant every predator knew where prey would eventually appear. Early humans approaching a riverbank faced layered threats. Crocodiles waited below surface reflections. Cats watched from vegetation cover. Scavengers observed from distance, hoping for opportunity. Even large herbivores, defending territory, could kill unintentionally. Drinking required strategy. Individuals approached in groups, scanning surroundings continuously. Some drank, while others watched. The pattern resembles coordinated behavior seen in modern prey species rather than predators. At this stage of evolution, humans functioned closer to cautious gatherers than confident hunters. The ground itself recorded danger. Tracks revealed what had passed recently. Early humans learned to read impressions in mud and dust as predictive tools, these silent messages. This cognitive mapping gradually reshaped the brain. The environment rewarded memory and anticipation rather than brute force. The individual who recognized patterns lived longer and produced offspring who inherited improved learning capacity. Yet despite vigilance, encounters were inevitable. Predators tested new prey constantly. A novel upright animal moving slowly across open ground would attract attention. Many attacks likely occurred during these first hundreds of thousands of years. Fossil evidence later revealed puncture wounds on hominin bones matching carnivore dentition, proving humans were frequently hunted rather than exclusively scavengers. The social structure of early humans likely formed around minimizing such losses. Large groups deterred certain predators. Collective noise created confusion. Coordinated retreat into climbable terrain increased survival rates. These were not planned tactics, but emergent behaviors reinforced through repeated experience. One critical shift occurred when humans began staying active slightly longer into twilight than other prey species. Most herbivores rested earlier to conserve energy, leaving fewer targets available. Predators adjusting to this gap encountered humans more often. This increased danger, but also opportunity. Humans learned predator movement patterns because they overlapped temporally. Observation slowly became an advantage. Instead of competing physically, humans competed informationally. They knew which paths predators preferred, where herds migrated seasonally, and which times of day were most hazardous. Knowledge functioned as a primitive defense. Fire would eventually amplify this advantage, but even before controlled flame, early humans used terrain features as protective tools. Rocky outcrops limited attack angles. Narrow gullies prevented flanking. Dense thorn thickets formed natural barriers. Selecting campsites became a learned skill passed through generations. Direction, peripheral awareness improved. The ability to imagine future danger emerged not as philosophy, but as necessity. Importantly, early humans did not dominate predators immediately after developing stone tools. Tools began as processing implements for bone and plant matter rather than effective weapons. A sharpened stone could cut flesh, but rarely stopped a charging animal. Distance remained safety's foundation. Therefore, avoidance dominated strategy. Humans survived not by defeating predators, but by reducing encounters. Migration patterns reflected this. Groups moved gradually following resource availability, but also responding to predator density. Areas heavily populated by large carnivores became temporary corridors rather than permanent settlements. Over generations, this produced expanding ranges across the continent. The ecological role of humans during this period was unusual. They were neither primary hunters nor simple scavengers. They occupied a flexible niche, exploiting opportunities created by larger species. When predators abandoned kills, humans approached cautiously. When fruit ripened, they gathered collectively. When threats intensified, they relocated. Such adaptability required communication more sophisticated than simple alarm calls. Gesture, posture, and sound combinations likely developed into proto-language systems describing immediate environmental conditions. These early exchanges did not share abstract ideas, but conveyed survival information. A broken branch could mean something passed recently. A smell carried from wind direction implied carcass presence. A distant call from another group might warn of roaming predators. Over time, brains that processed and remembered these signals more effectively were favored. In this sense, the dangerous ecosystem acted as a training ground for intelligence. The creatures inhabiting it had no awareness of shaping human evolution. Each predator simply followed instinct, refined over millions of years. Yet collectively, they formed selective pressure unlike any faced by previous primates. The earliest humans were not inventors entering a passive world. They were newcomers, stepping into an already perfected system. Every species around them had survived longer than their entire lineage had existed. To live among them required patience measured in generations, and among these inhabitants were specific animals whose interactions with humans left deeper marks than others. Some hunted them deliberately, some competed for food, some threatened simply by size. Each encounter taught lessons, encoded gradually into behavior and eventually into culture. The next chapters follow these encounters one by one, beginning with one of the first specialized hunters that learned upright primates could be prey. For early humans, survival was not a single skill, but a chain of decisions repeated every day. Waking up did not mean safety had been achieved. It only meant danger had paused. The morning light gave visibility, and visibility gave time to think. Time to think became the most valuable resource they possessed. At sunrise, the world changed ownership again. Predators that ruled the night retreated to shade and cover. Day hunters replaced them, but their methods differed. Instead of silent stalking in darkness, they relied on speed and surprise. The environment itself now determined human movement. Open plains were safer in full daylight than at dusk, yet they still held risk. Tall grass concealed motion even under bright sun. Early humans learned to move along edges where visibility expanded, preferring higher ground and areas where wind direction carried scent warnings. Smell mattered more than sight at times. The odor of decay meant a carcass nearby, and a carcass meant danger. A dead animal was rarely unattended for long. Even if predators were not visible, they were often close enough to return quickly. Humans approached slowly, circling rather than walking straight in. Some individuals watched the horizon, while others inspected the remains. This division of attention marked a subtle transition toward organized cooperation. Food gathering shaped daily routes. Plants provided reliable nutrition, but plant patches attracted herbivores, and herbivores attracted carnivores. Every feeding ground doubled as a potential hunting ground for something else. Humans learned to feed quickly and leave before patterns formed that predators could memorize. Repetition created predictability, and predictability led to ambush. In this world, memory functioned as defense. Individuals remembered where attacks had occurred and avoided those paths when possible. Seasonal change complicated this knowledge. Dry periods concentrated animals near shrinking water sources, increasing encounters. Wet seasons expanded territory but reduced predictability. Flexibility became necessary. Groups that adapted movement patterns survived longer than those relying on habit. Young members of the group learned primarily through observation. Instruction was not verbal in a modern sense. It was experiential. A sudden halt by adults signaled alertness. A change in walking formation indicated risk. Infants carried on hips watched every reaction closely. Over years, these patterns formed instinctive responses. The next generation inherited not only genes, but rehearsed behavior. Sleeping arrangements evolved in response to repeated losses. Early hominins likely began resting on elevated terrain, rocky ledges, or within thorn-dense vegetation. These areas limited approach angles. Climbing remained important, but was not always possible as body structure gradually changed toward longer distance walking. Instead, collective defense improved. Multiple individuals staying partially awake during the night reduced surprise attacks. Shifts of light sleep may have been an early form of coordinated vigilance. Sound played a complex role. Silence could signal safety, yet unnatural silence often warned of nearby predators disturbing smaller animals. Humans listened continuously. The sudden flight of birds or abrupt stop of insect noise triggered immediate attention. Over time, they learned to distinguish normal environmental variation from disturbance. This sensory interpretation required cognitive processing beyond reflex reaction. Stone use slowly expanded from cutting to deterrence. Throwing objects created distance between humans and threats. Even if not lethal, thrown stones disrupted approach patterns. Predators prefer minimal risk. Confusion and resistance sometimes convince them to choose easier prey. This did not make humans dominant, but slightly less attractive targets. Day length controlled activity. Early humans rarely traveled during deep night. Twilight was particularly dangerous because visibility was insufficient for humans, yet optimal for many hunters. Therefore, groups adjusted schedules to begin movement after sunrise and settle before sunset when possible. This temporal discipline shaped early planning behavior. They began anticipating future needs such as water access before darkness arrived. Weather added additional layers of complexity. Wind direction altered scent detection. Rain erased tracks but also masked approach sounds. Extreme heat forced midday rest, increasing vulnerability if shelter was poorly chosen. Each environmental variable demanded adjustment. The brain regions responsible for prediction and scenario evaluation gradually expanded because failure carried immediate cost. Encounters still occurred frequently. Sometimes predators tested the group, approaching slowly to judge reaction. Humans gathered tightly, facing outward, making noise and maintaining eye contact. Direct gaze communicates awareness in many species. An aware target is less appealing than a distracted one. Such confrontations may have lasted minutes, yet felt prolonged because decision determined survival. Injuries were common consequences even when attacks failed. A bite or claw wound without modern treatment often became fatal days later. Therefore, avoidance remained superior to confrontation. Groups favored retreat over pursuit. Territory ownership did not exist in a permanent sense. Mobility allowed survival. Staying too long in one location increased familiarity for predators' learning patterns. Through countless repetitions, early humans developed mental mapping of safe corridors between resources. These routes changed with seasons but followed logic based on visibility, escape options, and proximity to climbable structures. Over generations, these paths formed migration traditions, passed through imitation rather than explanation. Gradually, cognitive differences between humans and other animals widened. Many species relied on instinct shaped over evolutionary time. Humans supplemented instinct with flexible reasoning built from individual experience. A single dangerous event could alter behavior within one lifetime, not requiring thousands of generations to encode genetically. This accelerated adaptation. As brain capacity expanded, emotional responses diversified. Fear remained constant, but transformed into caution, anticipation, and eventually planning. Instead of reacting only to immediate stimuli, humans began preparing for situations not yet encountered that day. Carrying stones before entering dense brush or choosing camps earlier reflected foresight. These developments did not eliminate vulnerability. They reduced frequency of fatal encounters enough to allow population growth. With more individuals came more observation, and with more observation came improved collective knowledge. Information became the most effective survival tool long before advanced weapons appeared. The ecosystem, however, remained dominated by specialized predators. Some animals began recognizing humans as consistent competitors or prey. Repeated interaction forged familiarity. Among these creatures were stealth hunters, perfectly suited to wooded environments where early humans often sought refuge. One such predator adapted to ambushing climbing primates and moving silently through branches and shadows. Its encounters with early humans were not accidental, but part of its hunting strategy. Fossils later preserved evidence of these confrontations, revealing that humans were not merely witnesses of the ancient world, but active participants within its predator-prey relationships. The next chapter begins with this hunter, an animal that studied the same trees humans trusted for safety and proved that even refuge could become a trap. For many early human ancestors, trees represented safety. Climbing was an inherited skill from millions of years spent as arboreal primates. When danger appeared on the ground, elevation provided escape. Branches limited approach routes, and most large predators lacked the agility to pursue effectively. For a long time, this strategy worked. Then, humans encountered a predator that lived between ground and canopy. Dinophalis was not the largest carnivore of its time, nor the fastest. Its power came from specialization. Roughly the size of a modern jaguar, but built heavier in the forelimbs, it possessed semi-elongated upper canine teeth and a flexible spine suited for vertical movement. Unlike open savanna hunters, this cat favored wooded environments where shadows remained constant and escape paths narrowed. The habitat overlap was significant. Early hominins often gathered food near trees, slept near trees, and retreated to trees when threatened. Dinophalis used those same trees not for safety, but for concealment. The first encounters were likely sudden and confusing. A human climbing to avoid danger might find danger already above. An animal dropping from a branch produced almost no warning. Speed at such close distance made defense nearly impossible. Fossil evidence discovered in southern Africa later showed hominin skull fragments with puncture marks matching the spacing of Dinophelis canine teeth. The positioning of these wounds suggests attacks delivered from above or behind, targeting the head and neck. This method differed from pursuit predators. Dinophelis did not chase across open ground for long distances. It relied on proximity. Patience defined its hunting. It could remain motionless along a branch or beside a trunk until prey passed within reach. Early humans moving between feeding sites would have difficulty detecting it because it blended with vertical shapes in the environment. The psychological effect of such encounters shaped behavior deeply. An animal visible at distance allows preparation. An invisible one forces constant alertness. Humans began scanning not only horizon lines, but overhead space. This expanded vigilance increased cognitive load, but improved survival probability. Groups adjusted movement patterns. Instead of traveling directly beneath dense canopy whenever possible, they preferred edges where light improved visibility. When climbing, individuals chose thinner branches, less capable of supporting heavy predators. Before ascending, they may have thrown objects upward to disturb potential ambushes. Such caution reflects learned experience rather than instinct alone. Dinophelis likely targeted smaller or isolated individuals. Juveniles and those separated during foraging were vulnerable. This encouraged tighter group cohesion. Mothers remained closer to others while carrying young. Individuals vocalized more frequently to maintain contact when vegetation limited sight. These social behaviors increased coordination and may have accelerated development of structured communication. Competition also occurred at carcasses. If Dinophelis secured a kill, humans approaching for scavenging risked attack. The cat, designed for close combat rather than endurance, defended food aggressively within confined terrain. Early humans learned to wait longer before approaching remains found in wooded areas compared to open plains. Time since death became a factor in risk assessment. Unlike later saber-toothed cats, specialized for very large prey, Dinophelis hunted medium-sized animals, placing humans well within its target range. This blurred the boundary between predator and competitor. Humans could not easily displace it nor ignore its presence. They had to adapt around it. Evidence suggests repeated interactions rather than rare accidents. Multiple fossil sites show similar damage patterns, implying a persistent relationship over many generations. Natural selection would favor individuals capable of anticipating ambush zones, recognizing suspicious stillness in branches, and responding quickly to sudden movement. The environment itself taught these lessons harshly. A group might pass safely many times before a single fatal encounter altered behavior permanently. Survivors remembered. They avoided certain trees, changed resting heights, and remained uneasy in particular landscapes. Over decades, such caution became tradition passed through imitation. Dinophelis thrived because early humans had not yet developed effective projectile weapons. Stones thrown by hand required short distance and accuracy. Against a dropping attacker, reaction time was minimal. Only awareness reduced risk. Therefore, the species indirectly trained human perception. Our tendency to notice faces or forms hidden in foliage may trace partly to predators like this, where detecting subtle outlines meant survival. The cat's anatomy reinforced its role. Its forelimbs were robust, capable of grappling prey instantly. Shorter legs, compared to pursuit hunters, improved stability during leaps. Teeth were strong enough to penetrate bone, particularly the skull. Attacks aimed to incapacitate immediately, preventing escape or prolonged struggle that might attract competitors. Human response did not eliminate the threat quickly. Evolution moves slowly. For thousands of years, both species coexisted, each adjusted to the other's presence. Humans became more vigilant in trees. Dinophelis refined approach patterns to counter human awareness. This ongoing interaction created an arms race of perception rather than weaponry. Eventually, environmental change and competition from other carnivores contributed to the cat's disappearance. But by that time, it had already influenced human evolution. Our ancestors learned that safety zones could not be assumed. Even refuge required inspection. The legacy of Dinophelis is not recorded in myth because it vanished before complex storytelling existed. Instead, it remains written in behavior. The instinctive glance upward when entering wooded areas, the unease beneath overhanging branches, the preference for open visibility during rest. For early humans, trees were no longer guaranteed protection. They became spaces requiring negotiation. And in learning to question their first shelter, humans took a small step toward understanding that survival depended not on place, but on awareness. The presence of Dinophelis forced a change more profound than simple caution. It altered how early humans understood the environment itself. Before encounters with ambush predators of the canopy, danger had direction. It approached from the front, from the sides, or from the ground. After repeated attacks from above, direction lost certainty. Any place could hide threat. This uncertainty reshaped movement. Groups no longer walked in loose lines when passing wooded terrain. They compressed formation, reducing gaps between individuals. Spacing mattered because separation created opportunity. A predator needed only one isolated target. Close proximity increased noise and reduced stealth, but it also increased survival probability. Humans gradually accepted a trade-off. Efficiency sacrificed for safety. Observation habits expanded vertically. Instead of scanning only eye level and horizon, they inspected branches, trunk junctions, and shadow pockets. Over time, individuals who naturally paid attention to subtle irregularities lived longer. Those who ignored overhead spaces disappeared from the population. Evolution did not favor strength here. It favored perception. The young learned this first through fear. Sudden alarm calls triggered instinctive upward attention. Adults did not need explanation. The body reacted automatically. Heart rate increased, muscles prepared to move, eyes searched above. This repeated response eventually embedded into neurological pathways. Even modern humans retain sensitivity to shapes resembling concealed figures in foliage. Nightfall remained dangerous, but wooded daylight now carried its own tension. Early humans began choosing resting sites with limited vertical cover even if shade was reduced. Heat exposure became preferable to hidden approach paths. Comfort was secondary to visibility. Climbing behavior changed as well. Previously, elevation alone signaled security. After encounters with Dinophilis, climbing became deliberate. Individuals tested bark stability and branch thickness before committing weight. Some selected trees with minimal lateral branches, making descent attacks harder. Others climbed only partway, balancing escape height with observation ability. Communication improved in response. Soft sounds indicating reassurance may have developed alongside alarm calls. Constant panic exhausted energy, so distinguishing real threats from false signals became important. Groups likely refined different tones or gestures to describe types of danger: ground movement, distant predator, overhead suspicion. This refinement represented a cognitive leap. It required categorizing threats rather than reacting identically to all disturbances. Categorization is the foundation of complex thinking. A rustling bush no longer triggered blind flight, but assessment. Humans learned to pause, observe, then decide. Decision-making replaced reflex in many situations. Carcass scavenging illustrates this transition clearly. A dead animal beneath trees once promised food and cover. After repeated attacks, it suggested trap. Humans began approaching from open angles, making noise intentionally to reveal hidden predators. If no movement followed, they waited. Time became a defensive tool. Hunger encouraged risk, but experience moderated it. Dinophilis likely adapted in response. Predators observing prey altering behavior, adjust strategies, or shift targets. Some may have attacked during moments of distraction, such as while humans processed bones or carried food. Others may have targeted individuals lagging behind. This mutual adaptation formed a behavioral contest rather than a physical one. Injury patterns from fossils indicate that not every attack succeeded. Some hominins survived initial encounters long enough for bones to heal partially. These survivors became living memory holders. Their caution influenced group behavior. A scar carried instruction. Without spoken narrative, visible evidence guided younger members. Avoiding certain situations became tradition anchored in experience. Fire, when later controlled, likely reduced but did not eliminate such predators. Flames deterred approach at night, yet daytime interactions persisted. Dinophilis hunted through stealth, not darkness alone. Therefore, awareness remained primary defense. Over many generations, human brains increasingly prioritized predictive reasoning. Instead of asking what is happening, they evaluated what could happen. This mental simulation ability distinguished them from most other prey species. While antelope relied on speed and herd reaction, humans relied on anticipation. The cost was psychological tension. Continuous alertness required energy and cooperation. Individuals trusted others to notice what they missed. Shared vigilance formed the basis of social dependency. No single human could monitor all directions. Group living became necessity rather than preference. Eventually, climatic shifts reduced dense forests in certain regions. Open savannas expanded, altering predator composition. Dinophilis populations declined, unable to compete with new dominant carnivores better suited for plains. Its disappearance was gradual, unnoticed by the species it had pressured for millennia. But its impact remained. Humans emerging from these environments carried behavioral adaptations shaped by the threat. They preferred vantage points with clear lines of sight. They distrusted silence in vegetation. They instinctively looked behind and above when entering unfamiliar terrain. Such tendencies persisted long after the original predator vanished. The end of Dinophalis did not end danger. Instead, it prepared humans for new competitors, occupying different ecological roles. Among them was a scavenger powerful enough to challenge even large cats, and bold enough to approach human groups directly. Where Dinophalis relied on surprise, the next rival relied on intimidation. It did not hide in branches. It waited openly near food, confident in its strength. Early humans now faced a creature that did not ambush quietly, but dominated through force and endurance. The world beyond the trees would introduce them to the giant hyena. Leaving dense woodland did not free early humans from danger. It changed the rules of engagement. In open and semi-open terrain, threats became visible from farther away, but visibility worked both ways. Predators could also see humans at greater distance. The advantage of surprise diminished, replaced by contests of persistence and intimidation. Among the most formidable animals occupying this landscape was Pachycrocita, the giant hyena. This was not a scaled-up version of modern hyenas. It was heavier, broader-headed, and equipped with jaws capable of crushing bone thicker than a human arm. Standing nearly as tall at the shoulder as a large lion, but built more compactly, it relied less on speed and more on endurance and dominance. Where ambush cats attacked alone, Pachycrocita often existed within loose social structures, gathering where food was available and maintaining control through numbers and power. Its ecological role overlapped directly with early humans. Both sought carcasses, both followed migrating herds, both relied on awareness of landscape patterns. But unlike humans, Pachycrocita possessed physical superiority that required no tools to enforce. Carcasses in open plains rarely remained unattended. Vultures circling overhead revealed their location from kilometers away. Multiple species converged quickly: cats, smaller hyenas, scavenging birds, and eventually humans. When Pachycrocita arrived, the hierarchy changed. Other carnivores hesitated. Even large predators often surrendered remains rather than risk injury. For humans, this created a constant dilemma. A carcass represented calories essential for survival and brain development. Yet, approaching it risked confrontation with an animal capable of breaking bones effortlessly. Fossil assemblages reveal sites where hominin remains and Pachycrocita remains coexist alongside heavily gnawed bones. Tooth marks on hominin bones indicate not only predation, but also scavenging of human bodies after death. The relationship was reciprocal and harsh. Humans sometimes fed on remains abandoned by the hyena, and sometimes the hyena fed on humans. The animal's sensory abilities intensified the challenge. Its sense of smell allowed detection of decay from great distances. Humans attempting to hide food stores could rarely do so effectively. Carrying meat over long stretches attracted unwanted followers. Groups likely moved quickly after acquiring carcass fragments, minimizing time spent stationary. Unlike stealth predators, Pachycrocuta confronted directly. It approached with posture and sound designed to intimidate. Its powerful shoulders elevated the front of the body, and vocalizations carried across open terrain. This behavior tested human resolve. Standing ground required group coordination and risk tolerance. Retreating meant losing valuable nutrition. Early humans experimented with deterrence. Throwing stones became more purposeful here than against ambush cats. Distance attacks mattered because closing range favored the hyena completely. Multiple individuals launching projectiles simultaneously could create confusion, not lethal, but discouraging enough to allow brief access to meat before withdrawal. This pattern established a new survival method: rapid extraction. Instead of consuming food at the source, humans cut portions and retreated. Stone tools became sharper not only for processing but for speed. Efficiency reduced exposure time. The faster the group removed edible parts, the lower the chance of confrontation escalation. Pachycrocuta, however, adapted to human behavior. It learned that upright primates returned repeatedly to carcass sites after initial departure. Waiting nearby conserved energy and produced opportunity. Some confrontations likely occurred when humans believed the area cleared. This required new caution protocols. Individuals began observing scavenger bird behavior as indirect indicators of predator presence. If birds remained distant or unsettled, danger likely persisted. Night interactions were particularly risky. The hyena's nocturnal activity increased while human visibility dropped. Groups probably avoided carcass areas entirely after sunset unless starvation forced risk. Hunger repeatedly pushed boundaries, and some individuals paid the price. Despite danger, the presence of Pachycrocuta may have indirectly benefited human evolution. Access to marrow and high-fat content from bones contributed to neurological growth. Humans developed techniques to crack smaller bones using stones after predators left. Nutritional gains outweighed occasional losses in evolutionary terms. The psychological impact differed from Dinophalis encounters. The tree ambusher taught suspicion of hidden threat. The giant hyena taught confrontation management. Humans learned that not all predators could be avoided. Some had to be negotiated with through display, noise, and collective presence. Children observing adults during these events absorbed behavioral patterns. Loud, unified vocalizations, arm movements, and object throwing resembled ritualized intimidation displays. Over time, these behaviors may have become structured group actions rather than spontaneous reactions. The open plains also increased travel distances. Humans and Pachycrocuta followed similar migratory prey, causing repeated meetings across seasons. Familiarity bred recognition. Predators likely distinguished human groups as consistent competitors rather than random animals. Humans similarly recognized hyena postures, indicating aggression versus indifference. This mutual awareness created a tense equilibrium. Neither species dominated entirely, yet both shaped each other's behavior. Eventually, Environmental shifts and competition from other carnivores contributed to the decline of the giant hyena. But during its existence, it forced humans to practice something new: cooperative defense of resources. They were no longer only avoiding death, they were contesting food. Encounters with Pachycroceta rarely followed a predictable pattern. Sometimes the animal arrived after humans had already begun cutting meat. Other times, humans approached cautiously, only to find the hyena already feeding. Each situation required quick assessment. There was no universal rule for safety, only probabilities shaped by experience. When the giant hyena fed alone, humans had limited options. Its jaws could splinter large bones effortlessly, and its thick neck muscles allowed it to resist pulling or distraction. Approaching too closely meant immediate attack. In such moments, humans waited at a distance, watching. Patience replaced aggression. Eventually, the animal would consume its fill or be displaced by other predators, leaving fragments behind. Humans accepted reduced portions rather than risking total loss. However, when groups of humans arrived before the hyena settled, a different dynamic emerged. Noise became their primary tool. Coordinated shouting, rhythmic striking of stones, and sudden movement created uncertainty. Pachycroceta preferred low-risk feeding. An injury to a leg or jaw meant starvation. When faced with persistent disturbance, it sometimes retreated temporarily, circling nearby rather than abandoning entirely. Humans exploited this hesitation. A few individuals approached quickly, cutting large sections, while others maintained intimidation behavior. Efficiency mattered more than thoroughness. They took muscle and fat first, ignoring smaller scraps. Within minutes they withdrew, carrying food away before the animal regained confidence. These brief victories reinforced cooperation. A single individual could not challenge such a creature, but a coordinated group could negotiate access. This principle likely strengthened social bonds. Participation benefited everyone. Refusal endangered the group. Collective defense became expectation rather than choice. Yet success was inconsistent. Sometimes the hyena charged instead of retreating. Its mass allowed short bursts of speed sufficient to close distance quickly. In those moments, humans scattered toward pre-selected escape routes. Knowledge of terrain again determined survival. Individuals remembered climbable rocks, shallow ravines, or dense vegetation patches. Planning escape before confrontation became routine. Injury left permanent lessons. A broken limb or deep bite rarely healed fully. Survivors adapted behavior to avoid repeating mistakes. Their caution influenced younger members, gradually shaping shared strategy. Over generations, these strategies became traditions, followed without needing explanation. The presence of Pachycroceta also altered daily schedules. Humans learned that arriving early at carcasses increased chances of safe access. They began tracking herd movements more carefully, predicting where natural deaths or predator kills might occur. This anticipation reduced direct encounters. Instead of reacting to opportunity, they began seeking it deliberately. Such forward thinking marked a behavioral shift toward proactive survival. Rather than waiting for scavenging chances, humans used observation to arrive first or soon after a kill when predators were absent. This required understanding migration timing, watering patterns, and predator territories. Knowledge accumulated season by season. The hyena responded in parallel. Following vultures remained its strength, but it also learned human tendencies. Carcasses disturbed by cutting marks signaled human presence nearby. Waiting downwind sometimes produced new prey. Some hominin remains found in fossil sites suggest individuals were taken while carrying meat back to camp, not just at feeding grounds. This forced humans to reconsider transport methods. Carrying food openly over distance attracted attention. Groups likely moved more compactly when transporting meat, maintaining constant vigilance. Some members walked backward periodically, scanning rear approach, while others watched forward. Movement became a coordinated activity rather than simple travel. Night amplified risk again. Unlike ambush cats that relied heavily on concealment, Pachycrocita could follow scent trails under darkness. Humans probably avoided transporting meat after dusk whenever possible. If forced by circumstances, they increased noise and stayed tightly grouped, attempting to signal awareness rather than vulnerability. Over many generations, such interactions strengthened communication complexity. Different sounds indicated approach, retreat, or warning specific to large scavengers. Gesture accompanied voice. Individuals reading each other's reactions quickly improved. Influence remained. It taught humans resource defense without direct killing power. It showed that persistence and cooperation could equal strength. It encouraged planning beyond immediate hunger. After learning to compete with the bone crusher, humans expanded into unfamiliar territories beyond Africa. There, they would face predators unlike any mammal they had known. Some did not stalk on four legs. Some attacked with beaks instead of teeth. The next challenge came from creatures that hunted differently from anything in their ancestral memory. As early humans gradually expanded beyond Africa, they entered environments shaped by evolutionary histories completely separate from the one that formed them. The familiar balance between cats, hyenas, and herbivores no longer applied everywhere. New continents contained predators that behaved according to rules humans had never experienced before. Among the strangest were large, predatory birds. Long before humans arrived, certain regions supported flightless, carnivorous birds that filled ecological roles similar to mammalian hunters. Though many of the largest terror birds had declined before human migration reached some areas, related large ground birds and powerful raptors still existed across parts of Eurasia and nearby territories during periods of human expansion. They were not merely scavengers. They were active hunters, adapted for speed and precision. Unlike mammals, these predators relied heavily on vision and sudden acceleration. Their bodies were built upright, with long muscular legs capable of rapid forward bursts. Instead of jaws closing sideways, they used downward strikes of hardened beaks aimed at vulnerable areas such as the skull, neck, or spine. The attack was brief but decisive. For humans accustomed to tracking threats along the ground, this presented confusion. A mammal stalking through grass leaves patterns, bent stems, shifting shadows, or sound from weight distribution. A tall bird standing motionless in open terrain produced almost none of these signals. its shape blended with tree trunks or rocky formations until it moved. The first encounters were likely misinterpreted. A distant, upright silhouette might resemble another human at far range. Only when it advanced at speed did its nature become clear. Reaction time was limited because the attack method involved closing distance quickly and delivering a single powerful strike. These birds hunted primarily during daylight when their vision was strongest. This reversed a long-learned assumption that daylight meant relative safety. Early humans now faced a predator fully active under the sun, capable of detecting movement across wide open spaces. Groups adjusted by altering spacing once again. On plains, they avoided forming thin lines. Instead, they moved in compact clusters so that an approaching bird confronted multiple moving figures rather than a single isolated target. Confusion reduced attack commitment. Many predators choose the easiest victim. A tightly grouped formation removed that option. Unlike mammalian carnivores, intimidation through noise worked inconsistently. Some birds retreated when faced with sudden movement, while others pressed forward relying on their strike speed. Humans began carrying longer sticks or equally for both species. Evidence suggests that early humans learned to watch the behavior of grazing animals closely, called aerial or visual hunters. Humans mirrored these cues, interpreting animal reactions as environmental information. Water sources again became shared territory. Birds approached openly to drink, sometimes giving humans opportunity to observe safely from distance. Repeated observation built understanding of their movement patterns. Predictability reduced fear, replacing panic with cautious awareness. Yet attacks still occurred, particularly on juveniles or individuals carrying food and distracted. The bird's goal was efficiency. A quick incapacitating blow minimized struggle. Such encounters reinforced the importance of constant scanning even under bright conditions. These predators also altered human rest behavior. Resting in open ground exposed individuals to sudden approach. Groups preferred resting with a backdrop such as rock walls or dense brush behind them, limiting attack directions. This habit mirrored earlier adaptations to mammalian hunters, but applied now to a different threat type. Unlike cats or hyenas, large predatory birds could not easily drag prey over distance. After striking, they remained near the fallen target. This sometimes allowed group members to recover injured companions or drive the attacker away through coordinated movement. The possibility of rescue strengthened social bonds and defensive cooperation. Over generations, humans incorporated these lessons into migration choices. Regions heavily populated by such predators became transit zones rather than settlement areas. Knowledge passed through movement patterns rather than spoken maps. Eventually, many of these avian hunters disappeared due to climate shifts and competition with emerging mammalian predators and humans themselves. But the encounters left a mark. Humans learned that danger could approach without scent, without stealth, and without nightfall. Predators were not limited to familiar forms. Survival depended on adapting perception each time the environment changed. The challenge posed by large predatory birds was not only physical, it altered how humans interpreted movement itself. Mammalian predators revealed intention through posture. A crouching cat signaled imminent attack. A circling hyena indicated testing behavior, but birds offered little warning. They did not lower their bodies before striking. They did not stalk slowly into range. They simply advanced, then accelerated. For early humans, this unpredictability forced faster decision-making. Hesitation that might have been harmless against distant predators became dangerous here. The mind had to judge quickly whether an approaching shape was passing by or preparing to strike. Groups responded by developing immediate collective reactions. Instead of waiting for confirmation, they acted at suspicion. Individuals stepped closer together, raised arms or held branches outward, and faced the potential attacker. Presenting a unified front increased perceived size. Many animals calculate risk based on apparent mass. Several upright figures, appearing larger together, reduced the chance of commitment. Children were moved to the center of formation. This pattern likely began instinctively but became routine. Those at the edges maintained outward focus, while central members maintained awareness of surroundings. Such positioning resembled defensive circles, later used against mammalian hunters, but adapted for a fast frontal assault. Stone throwing also evolved during these encounters. Against hyenas, stones served mainly to discourage approach. Against birds, accuracy mattered more than impact force. A well-placed throw, disrupting balance or vision, could end the attempt immediately. Humans practiced throwing not just strongly, but precisely. Repetition improved coordination between eye and arm, an ability that would later become central to hunting success. Landscape choice again shifted. Wide, flat plains exposed humans to long-distance visual detection. Yet, dense cover limited their own awareness. They learned to prefer broken terrain with scattered obstacles, offering partial shelter without blocking view. These intermediate environments provided escape paths while maintaining observation range. Daily rhythm changed subtly. Midday brightness reduced shadows, making predators easier to detect. Early morning and late afternoon produced longer shadows that concealed movement. Humans gradually concentrated travel during clearer lighting conditions when possible, resting more during times when perception was compromised. Unlike mammalian predators, these birds did not pursue over long distances if an attack failed. They relied on surprise and rapid outcome. Humans recognized this and learned that brief resistance often ended the encounter. Holding position rather than fleeing immediately sometimes proved safer. Running could trigger chase reflex, while standing firm created uncertainty. This required discipline. Fear encourages flight, but repeated survival experiences taught restraint. Over time, emotional control became part of group culture. Panic endangered everyone. Calm behavior increased collective safety. Such emotional regulation represented a significant cognitive development, linking survival with behavioral moderation. Observation extended beyond immediate threat. Humans began identifying nesting areas and habitual paths. Avoiding these zones reduced encounters. Memory of territory boundaries allowed planning routes days in advance rather than reacting moment by moment. Planning transformed migration from wandering to deliberate travel. Communication signals likely diversified further. Specific alarm sounds indicating fast approaching danger became distinct from those for stalking predators. The group needed to know not just that danger existed, but how it behaved. Rapid information transfer saved seconds, and seconds determined outcome. Injury recovery influenced learning as well. Survivors of bird strikes bore different wounds than those caused by teeth or claws. Deep punctures or crushing blows to upper body revealed attack direction. Such visible evidence reinforced awareness of vulnerable areas, encouraging protective postures during future confrontations. Gradually, these predators lost dominance as climates changed and human numbers increased. Some regions saw them replaced by mammalian carnivores better suited to new environments. Yet the psychological adaptation remained valuable. Humans now expected novelty and threats. Familiarity was no longer assumed. Each new land required relearning safety rules. This mindset prepared them for the next environment they would enter, one where size rather than speed defined danger. Here the threat would not rely on sudden strikes, but overwhelming presence. Avoidance alone would not always be enough, because the animal could detect humans across vast distances and move through terrain without obstruction. In the northern expanses, humans would encounter a creature so large that even predators respected it. Its height exceeded any animal they had previously faced, and its reach altered how they understood open ground. The short-faced bear awaited them. As human groups moved into colder northern territories, the environment itself seemed quieter than the lands they had known. Fewer species occupied these regions, and vegetation spread across vast open distances. Visibility extended farther than in forests or mixed terrain. At first, this appeared safer. Danger, it seemed, would be seen long before it arrived. Then humans encountered an animal that erased the comfort of distance. The short-faced bear dominated these landscapes. Taller than any bear alive today when standing upright and still immense, even on all fours, it possessed long limbs built for covering ground efficiently. Its body was not shaped for climbing trees or sudden turns in tight spaces. Instead, it excelled at moving directly across open terrain with relentless speed. For early humans, this was a new form of predator pressure. Previous threats relied on concealment, ambush, or territorial defense. The short-faced bear relied on presence. It did not need to hide. Its size alone displaced competitors. Even large carnivores avoided confrontation when possible. The bear walked where it wished and fed on what it chose. Initial human reactions were likely misjudged. From a distance, the animal might have seemed slow due to its heavy frame. Many large animals appear less dangerous at long range because their movement lacks sudden bursts. But the bear's stride covered enormous ground rapidly. By the time its speed became apparent, escape options narrowed. Tracking evidence suggests it followed migrating herbivores across plains and steppe regions. Humans, following the same herds, crossed its path repeatedly. Unlike hyenas competing at carcasses or cats ambushing in cover, this bear could simply approach directly and claim territory by arrival alone. Its height changed visual perception. Standing upright, it could see over grass and low obstacles, detecting human movement far sooner than most predators. Humans lost the advantage of early detection they had relied upon in open terrain. Hiding became ineffective beyond very short distances. The animal's diet remains debated, but its anatomy indicates strong scavenging ability combined with potential active hunting. Regardless of preference, humans represented either food or interference. Neither outcome favored close proximity. Early encounters likely ended in immediate retreat. Running, however, presented a problem. The bear's endurance and stride allowed it to maintain pursuit longer than humans expected. Climbing offered limited refuge because suitable trees were scarce in many regions it inhabited. Even when trees existed, reaching them before the bear closed distance was uncertain. This forced humans to rely heavily on terrain selection. Rocky outcrops, steep slopes, and narrow passages limited the animal's movement more than flat ground. Groups began planning travel routes based on escape geography rather than shortest distance. A longer path near broken terrain proved safer than a direct crossing of open land. Camp placement also changed. Elevated positions provided earlier visual warning. A distant moving shape on horizon gave precious minutes to relocate. Groups avoided sleeping in valley bottoms where approach could occur unseen behind ridges. Even water access required caution, as descending to rivers reduced visibility advantage. Stone tools offered minimal offensive capability against such mass. Instead, they served preparation roles. Humans gathered stones before resting so they could create noise and visual disturbance quickly if the bear approached. While unlikely to injure seriously, coordinated throwing could discourage curiosity and encourage the animal to continue past. Fire, once controlled reliably, became especially important in these regions. Unlike stealth predators, the bear reacted to unfamiliar sensory input. Flame and smoke altered its behavior, often causing hesitation. Night camps organized around fire provided psychological security and practical defense simultaneously. Despite precautions, close encounters occurred. Fossil sites containing both bear and human remains suggest overlapping use of shelters such as caves. Competition for these limited, safe spaces increased tension. Humans arriving at a cave might discover the bear already occupying it. The decision then involved risk assessment: wait, leave, or attempt to drive it away. Such decisions demanded group agreement. Acting alone endangered all. Communication skills strengthened as coordination became essential. Timing, movement, and shared intent determined success or failure. The psychological weight of facing an animal that did not fear them shaped human behavior profoundly. Previous predators could be deterred through noise or numbers occasionally. The short-faced bear recognized little as threat. Humans learned humility before power and adapted by avoiding confrontation whenever possible. Distance once represented safety. Now it only represented time. The presence of the short-faced bear changed more than travel routes. It changed how humans judged scale itself. Previously, size indicated danger, but distance balanced it. A large animal far away allowed time to react. With this bear, distance only delayed an encounter that might still occur. Its speed across open ground compressed space in ways early humans had not experienced before. Groups began assigning constant watchers during movement across plains. These individuals scanned the horizon rather than the ground. Their task was not to track footprints, but to notice silhouettes. The human eye became trained to recognize unnatural shapes against skylines, a skill that improved survival. A slight vertical motion far away might signal the bear hours before contact. When a sighting occurred, immediate decisions followed. Humans rarely ran instantly unless the animal changed direction toward them. Instead, they altered their path gradually, angling toward. Humans recognized behavior patterns. The bear did not always approach with intent to attack. Often, it followed herd movement or traveled between feeding areas. Learning to distinguish curiosity from direct approach saved energy and prevented panic. This required observation over repeated encounters and communication within the group to interpret signals consistently. Carcass encounters posed particular danger. A kill in open terrain might appear abandoned, yet the bear often returned after resting nearby. Humans approaching such remains risked meeting it at close range. To reduce this risk, they watched scavenger birds carefully. Birds landing and feeding calmly suggested absence of dominant scavengers. Birds circling without landing suggested waiting for a larger animal still present. These indirect signs became part of environmental language. Humans read the behavior of other species as information networks. This ability expanded beyond immediate threats, forming the foundation of ecological awareness. The environment itself communicated if interpreted correctly. Night strategy differed as well. While darkness concealed humans from many predators, the short-faced bear's sense of smell still located camps. Fire therefore served dual roles: visibility and deterrence. Camps were organized with fuel prepared before nightfall so flames could be maintained continuously. Sudden darkness risked unwanted investigation. When close encounters became unavoidable, humans used coordinated display, standing together, raising arms, shouting, and throwing objects created visual expansion. Against smaller predators, this might provoke retreat. Against the bear, it often produced hesitation rather than fear. Hesitation was enough. Groups used that moment to move toward protective terrain rather than to attack. Injury avoidance remained priority. A wounded bear would be more dangerous than a cautious one. Humans learned restraint. Survival meant leaving resources behind if necessary. A carcass lost was preferable to lives lost. This acceptance of strategic retreat became ingrained behavior rather than failure. Generations growing under this pressure developed stronger planning instincts. Routes between seasonal camps were chosen months in advance based on known bear ranges. Knowledge accumulated collectively and passed to younger members through demonstration. A specific valley might always be crossed at midday when visibility was highest. A certain ridge might be avoided during migration season. The psychological effect differed from previous predators. Dinophilis created suspicion. Pachycrocuta created rivalry. The short-faced bear created respect. Humans recognized an animal they could neither outfight nor easily outwit. They adapted by understanding rather than confronting. Eventually, as climates warmed and ecosystems shifted, the bear disappeared from many regions. Humans did not cause its extinction directly in most cases. Environmental change reduced suitable habitat and prey. But by then, humans had gained new behavioral traits: long-distance planning, horizon awareness, and acceptance that survival sometimes required surrendering opportunity. With these skills, humans continued spreading into diverse environments. Yet not every threat pursued them intentionally. Some dangers came simply from size and unpredictability. In new lands, enormous herbivores occupied feeding grounds humans also needed. They were not hunters, but encounters could be just as lethal. The next challenge came from creatures that did not stalk or chase yet could kill without meaning to. Not every deadly encounter in the ancient world involved a predator. In many regions early humans entered, the largest threat came from animals that had no interest in hunting them at all. Massive herbivores dominated landscapes across Eurasia and the Americas. They grazed, migrated, and defended territory with force that far exceeded any predator's attack. For humans accustomed to reading stalking behavior, these animals were difficult to interpret. A predator's body language often reveals intention. A grazing giant might show no warning before reacting violently to proximity. Survival required understanding not hunger, but space. Among these creatures were giant ground sloths, enormous bison, and woolly rhinoceroses. Each differed in shape and behavior, yet shared one critical trait. Their size allowed them to ignore most threats. Humans, small and slow, did not register as hunters. They registered as disturbance. The giant ground sloth stood taller than a human even while moving on all fours. When rearing upright, it could reach vegetation far above head height. Its long claws were not designed for pursuit, but for pulling branches and defending against large carnivores. A single swing could crush bone. Early humans encountering such an animal likely felt confusion. It did not stalk, yet approaching it could be fatal. Curiosity posed danger. Humans often investigated new animals cautiously to determine if they were edible or threatening. With megaherbivores, approach, distance determined outcome. Too close and defensive reaction triggered. The sloth's movement appeared slow, but its reach was immediate within range. Humans learned to observe from afar first. If an animal changed feeding direction repeatedly or raised its head often, it signaled alertness. Calm feeding indicated tolerance at greater distance. These distinctions became part of shared knowledge. Younger members copied adult spacing instinctively. The woolly rhinoceros represented a different challenge. It possessed poor eyesight but acute hearing and smell. This created unpredictable encounters. A human approaching from downwind might remain unnoticed until too near, provoking sudden charge. Unlike predators that evaluated risk before attacking, the rhinoceros reacted reflexively to perceived threat. Tracks helped avoid such meetings. Fresh footprints, combined with undisturbed vegetation, suggested recent presence. Humans adjusted travel routes around these areas. Wind direction became critical. Moving upwind increased detection risk, while downwind increased surprise risk. Groups balanced these factors based on terrain. Giant bison added another variable: herd behavior. One animal alone might ignore humans. A herd reacted collectively. Sudden running within the group could cause trampling unrelated to direct attack. Humans learned to stay outside herd movement corridors, especially near water crossings where animals compressed into narrow paths. Unlike predator encounters, deterrence rarely worked. Noise or thrown objects might startle, but could also provoke stampede or charge. Avoidance was the primary defense. Humans observed feeding patterns and waited for animals to pass rather than attempting displacement. Yet, megaherbivores also offered opportunity. When one died naturally or became trapped, it provided enormous food resources. Humans approached such carcasses carefully, aware that other animals might guard or investigate them. Processing required time and coordination. Groups established watch rotations while others cut meat. These experiences taught humans a critical distinction. Danger did not require intent. An animal many times larger could kill without aggression simply by reacting naturally. Understanding this reduced unnecessary confrontation and improved planning. Over generations, humans became skilled interpreters of body language across species. They recognized ear position, head angle, and movement rhythm as signals. Such interpretation extended cognitive ability beyond predator avoidance into broader ecological awareness. This knowledge later aided hunting strategies. Before humans could hunt large animals effectively, they first learned to coexist with them safely. Respect for distance preceded attempts at pursuit. The ancient world was not divided simply between hunter and hunted. Sometimes survival meant acknowledging another creature's path and stepping aside. Repeated encounters with megaherbivores taught humans a lesson different from any predator conflict. Predators made decisions. These giants reacted. Predicting a decision required reading intent. Predicting a reaction required reading thresholds. Humans began to understand that every large animal possessed a distance at which calm turned into force. This concept reshaped daily travel. Instead of choosing routes based only on terrain or water availability, humans considered animal traffic patterns. Paths worn into ground by heavy bodies marked habitual movement. Crossing these routes at the wrong time increased risk. Groups waited until herds passed before continuing. Patience replaced urgency. Groups adapted by avoiding single-file movement in narrow passages. Individuals moved with lateral distance, so one attack did not endanger all. The outer members remained alert while central members watched behind. This multi-direction vigilance increased chances of detecting pre-attack movement, such as shifting grass or disturbed birds. Fire began to alter the balance gradually. Though not universally effective, open flame reduced willingness of cats to approach directly. Night camps encircled by firelight lowered ambush probability. Daytime, however, still required awareness because these predators hunted under various light conditions. Stone tools again shifted role. Throwing at close range could disrupt leap trajectory. A well-timed impact during launch might prevent proper grip. Practice improved reaction speed. Humans likely rehearsed throwing, not consciously, but through repeated exposure to threat, embedding coordination into daily activity. Carcass competition intensified danger. Saber-toothed cats guarded kills strongly because their hunting success required precision effort. humans approaching too soon faced direct defense. They learned to observe from distance until the predator fed fully or left temporarily. Patience replaced risk. Evidence from fossil sites indicates some human remains bear marks consistent with large cat attacks, including punctures at neck vertebrae. These findings confirm that encounters were not rare accidents, but part of ongoing ecological interaction. Unlike the giant hyena, these cats did not test human groups openly. They targeted moments of vulnerability, individuals lagging, distracted gatherers, or members near dense cover. This selective pressure reinforced group cohesion further. Separation became increasingly dangerous in regions where such predators lived. Psychologically, saber-toothed cats created acute fear rather than general caution. Their attacks were silent and sudden, leaving little time for response. Humans adapted by maintaining constant scanning behavior and by choosing campsites with minimal surrounding concealment. Open visibility sometimes outweighed shelter comfort. Over time, humans began altering landscape, deliberately using controlled fire to clear vegetation around camps. This reduced hiding spots and improved detection range. Environmental modification represented a new survival strategy beyond mere adaptation. Humans started shaping surroundings to reduce predator advantage. Despite these efforts, the cats remained formidable. For thousands of years, coexistence continued, each species adjusting patterns around the other. Humans survived not through strength, but through awareness multiplied by cooperation. The struggle with these precision killers would push human behavior closer to active defense than ever before. Living alongside saber-toothed cats demanded a level of readiness different from any previous threat. Avoidance alone no longer guaranteed safety. The cats selected their moment carefully, often attacking when escape routes appeared limited. Humans gradually realized that passive caution needed reinforcement through active response. One of the earliest changes involved positioning during rest. Camps were no longer placed merely where resources were nearby, but where approach angles could be controlled. Natural barriers such as rock walls, steep slopes, or water edges became preferred boundaries. Humans arranged themselves so that at least one side of the group was protected by terrain, reducing directions an attack could originate. Fire enhanced this arrangement. Instead of a single flame, multiple smaller fires were distributed around the resting area. This created uneven light and shadow that revealed movement better than a central blaze alone. The flickering perimeter forced predators to cross illuminated zones, giving humans precious moments to react. Night vigilance evolved into structured rotation. Individuals took turns, remaining partially awake while others slept. This pattern likely began informally, but became habitual through repeated necessity. Those who ignored this practice risked losing members unexpectedly. Over generations, cooperative night watching became a social expectation. During travel, humans began carrying stones deliberately rather than picking them up only when needed. Having objects ready shortened reaction time. Some individuals also carried longer wooden shafts, not as complex weapons, but as extensions of reach. A thrust toward a leaping animal could interrupt grip long enough for others to assist. Encounters sometimes escalated beyond intimidation. If a cat injured but failed to secure a target, the group responded collectively. Loud, coordinated movement toward the predator could force it to retreat, especially if it feared injury to limbs essential for future hunts. This was not true hunting behavior, but defensive pressure. Still, it represented a psychological shift. Humans were no longer purely fleeing prey. Learning played a major role. Survivors of attacks carried scars that influenced group behavior. They demonstrated through action how to react when grass shifted unnaturally or birds scattered abruptly. Younger members imitated these responses until they became instinctive habits. Environmental modification increased as well. Vegetation around frequently used camps was cleared repeatedly. Paths to water sources were maintained open where possible. Over time, these alterations created small zones where ambush became difficult. Though primitive, this was an early example of humans reshaping ecosystems to reduce predation risk. Saber-toothed cats responded by targeting more isolated prey when available. As human groups grew slightly larger and more coordinated, attacks on them carried greater risk. The balance slowly shifted. Humans did not eliminate the cats directly, but reduced their success rate enough to encourage avoidance. This reduction had profound coordinated movement, not only defensively, but in observing large herbivore routes. They began understanding that if a group could discourage a predator, it might also influence other animals' movement indirectly. The disappearance of saber-toothed cats occurred over long spans influenced by climate change and ecosystem shifts. Humans alone did not cause their extinction, but growing human adaptability contributed to altered predator-prey dynamics. As these cats faded, humans found themselves less constrained by constant ambush threat. This marked a turning point. For generations, humans survived by reacting to stronger creatures. Now the environment contained fewer specialists capable of hunting them reliably. The balance did not make humans invulnerable, but it opened possibility. They could move not only to avoid danger, but to pursue opportunity. The final chapter follows how this gradual change transformed humans from careful survivors into the dominant presence, shaping the fate of the remaining giants. For most of their existence, humans survived by fitting into the world's existing balance. Predators hunted, scavengers competed, herbivores moved, and humans adapted. But as climates shifted and many specialized hunters declined, a quiet transformation began. Humans did not suddenly become the strongest animal. They became the most flexible one. The difference lay in cooperation combined with planning. Earlier, groups reacted to immediate threats. Now they began preparing for future events, days or even weeks ahead. Seasonal migration patterns of large animals were remembered across years. Water levels rising or falling predicted herd movement. Instead of arriving after predators finished feeding, humans started positioning themselves where animals would soon pass. This was not yet organized hunting in the modern sense. It began as controlled scavenging. Humans waited near natural traps such as narrow valleys, muddy banks, or steep slopes where animals sometimes stumbled or became trapped. When an animal fell or weakened, humans arrived quickly before other scavengers could gather. Speed of response mattered more than strength. Groups carried prepared stone tools and traveled with intent rather than wandering. Communication within the group grew more structured. Gestures and sounds coordinated movement silently to avoid startling animals prematurely. Fire played a major role in this shift. Beyond protection, it allowed landscape manipulation. Burning dry grass in selected areas encouraged new plant growth later, attracting grazing animals. Humans did not fully understand ecological mechanisms, but repeated observation taught that burned areas often drew herds after regrowth. This created predictable feeding locations. With predictability came opportunity. Instead of chasing animals across open ground, humans waited along routes they knew herds would use. When animals approached obstacles such as cliffs or river bends, groups appeared gradually, guiding movement unintentionally toward difficult terrain. Panic among herd animals sometimes caused falls or separations. Humans then approached injured individuals cautiously. These events were dangerous, but less so than confronting a healthy herd directly. Patience replaced force. Cooperation ensured that no single individual bore full risk. Some distracted, while others prepared cutting tools. The process resembled problem-solving more than combat. As success repeated, confidence increased. Humans began testing more direct influence over animal movement. Loud, coordinated noise from multiple sides caused herds to alter direction. By positioning themselves carefully, they could guide animals away from escape paths. Even without sophisticated weapons, controlling space altered outcomes. Predators still existed, but now they often arrived after humans had already begun processing meat. The relationship reversed from earlier times. Instead of waiting for carnivores to finish, humans sometimes forced them to keep distance using numbers and fire. This change affected settlement patterns. Groups could remain longer in favorable areas because food sources became more reliable. Longer stays allowed development of more stable social structures. Knowledge accumulated across seasons in one location rather than resetting during constant migration. Children growing in this environment learned different lessons than their ancestors. Instead of only avoiding danger, they observed coordinated action creating advantage. Problem-solving expanded beyond survival into strategy. Gradually, megafauna populations declined in regions humans occupied. Multiple factors contributed: climate shifts, reducing habitat, and increasing human efficiency in exploiting vulnerable animals. Humans did not hunt every individual, but repeated pressure altered reproductive balance over generations. The transformation was slow enough that no single generation noticed fully. Yet the pattern spread across continents. Wherever humans arrived, large animals unfamiliar with cooperative primates struggled to adapt quickly. For the first time, humans influenced which creatures remained common and which became rare. The disappearance of the great animals did not occur in a single moment. It unfolded gradually over many human lifetimes, subtle enough that no one generation could see the full pattern. Elders remembered seeing more herds in youth than in age. Hunting grounds once crowded with movement became quieter. Tracks that had filled soft earth every morning appeared less frequently. At first, humans likely interpreted this as migration change. Animals had always moved with seasons. A valley empty one year might fill the next, but in many regions the return never came. The relationship between humans and megafauna had shifted beyond coexistence. For thousands of years, humans adapted themselves to the world. Now the world began adapting to humans. Each successful coordinated hunt removed individuals that reproduced slowly. Large animals, especially those bearing few young, could not recover quickly from repeated losses. Climate also played a role. Warming periods, altered vegetation zones, shrinking the cold grasslands many giants depended upon. Some species retreated northward or to higher elevations. Others faced shrinking ranges with increasing encounters with humans concentrated in the same remaining habitats. Pressure accumulated from both environment and intelligence. Humans did not intend extinction. They sought food and safety, yet their new abilities multiplied impact. A predator kills to eat and rests afterward. Humans planned, returned, remembered, and improved. The advantage was not strength, but persistence across generations. As animals became rarer, human behavior adapted again. Groups traveled farther to locate familiar prey. Stories began forming around sightings of unusually large creatures, not yet myths, but recollections of events becoming uncommon. Knowledge, once practical, became narrative because opportunities to apply it diminished. Children heard about animals they might never see. Elders described tracks larger than a human torso or calls echoing across plains at dusk. These memories marked a cultural shift. For the first time, humans lived in a world less crowded with creatures stronger than themselves. Predators that once competed directly with humans disappeared alongside the prey they depended on. Saber-toothed cats vanished where large herbivores dwindled. Giant hyenas faded as carcasses became scarce. The towering bear no longer walked the horizon. Without the ecological web supporting them, specialists could not remain. Humans, adaptable generalists, persisted. This persistence carried consequence. Without constant pressure from dominant predators, human settlements expanded. Tools diversified beyond survival. Social bonds strengthened as daily life required less immediate defense. Fear remained part of memory rather than daily expectation. Yet traces endured in behavior. People still preferred sleeping near barriers. They still watched open ground before crossing. They still reacted to sudden silence in nature with alertness. These instincts no longer matched visible threats, but reflected inherited responses shaped by extinct encounters. The ancient animals left no written record, only bones and marks upon bones. But their influence survived in human perception. Our tendency to gather in groups at night, to fear unseen movement, to read animal behavior instinctively, all originated in a time when survival depended on noticing before understanding. Eventually, humans became the dominant force shaping ecosystems. Forests burned intentionally. Herds were managed, later domesticated. The relationship transformed from negotiation to control. But beneath control lay memory of vulnerability. The world early humans entered had been ancient and established. The world they left behind was different, quieter, and increasingly defined by their presence. They did not conquer it in a single triumph. They changed it step by step, decision by decision, encounter by encounter. The extinct animals were not simply obstacles overcome, they were teachers. Each forced adaptation that allowed humans to continue. Without the ambush cat, vigilance would differ. Without the bone crusher, cooperation would weaken. Without the giant bear, planning would remain short-sighted. Without the mega herbivores, distance judgment would lack meaning. Without the saber-toothed cats, resistance might never emerge. Humanity did not rise alone. It rose, shaped by creatures that no longer walk the earth. And though their bodies vanished, the behaviors they carved into human survival remain, carried silently by every generation that wakes, looks around, and prepares for what might be waiting beyond sight. Long after the last saber-toothed cat vanished, and the great bear no longer crossed the horizon, the land did not immediately feel empty to the humans living within it. Change in nature rarely announces itself in a single season. Instead, it becomes noticeable through absence. A trail once avoided becomes ordinary to cross. A water source, once approached with fear, becomes routine. The mind slowly stops, expecting danger at every sound. For generations, humans had lived with constant calculation. Every decision considered the possibility of a stronger creature nearby. Now the calculations shifted. Attention moved from survival against animals towards survival against environment and other humans. The habits remained, but their purpose evolved. Morning routines illustrated the difference. Earlier, people would rise and spend long moments scanning surroundings before dispersing from camp. Now, they still looked outward, but often found nothing larger than distant grazing herds. The instinct persisted even when immediate threat no longer justified it. Memory lived inside behavior long after experience changed. Children born into this quieter world learned caution through imitation, yet their lives differed from those of their grandparents. They heard stories of animals that could crush bone or outrun the wind, but they rarely saw them. Their understanding of danger became abstract rather than immediate. Fear transformed into respect for stories rather than reaction to presence. Hunting practices expanded in this new balance. Instead of waiting for natural accidents or guiding weakened animals into traps, humans began selecting targets more deliberately. Smaller and faster animals required planning and coordination of movement rather than simply positioning along migration routes. The skills learned while avoiding predators now helped them pursue prey. Group communication grew more detailed. During encounters with the ancient giants, signals meant act now or retreat. In the quieter world, signals described direction, distance, and timing. Cooperation moved beyond defense into organized effort. Knowledge, once shared for protection, became knowledge shared for efficiency. Fire changed meaning as well. It was no longer only a barrier against night hunters. It became a center for activity. Around it, tools were refined, hides processed, and plans discussed through gesture and growing language. The perimeter of flame once marked the edge of safety. Now it marked the center of community. Even so, traces of the old world shaped daily choices. Camps remained near natural barriers despite reduced necessity. Travel still avoided narrow passes at dusk, though ambush predators were gone. These behaviors survived because they had worked for countless generations. Evolution does not erase habits quickly, when they carry little cost. Occasionally, humans encountered bones of creatures no longer living, large rib cages protruding from soil or massive skulls half buried near dried riverbeds. Adults examined them cautiously, aware of shapes remembered from earlier times. Younger members saw them as curiosities rather than warnings. In this way, memory moved from practical instruction into cultural inheritance. As people expanded into new territories, they carried both knowledge and assumption. Some lands held fewer dangers from animals, but more from weather. Harsh, cold, storms, and scarcity replaced teeth and claws as primary threats. Yet the mental framework developed under predation remained useful. Observation, cooperation, and planning adapted naturally to new challenges. The absence of powerful predators also altered animal behavior. Herds lingered longer in open areas, some species lost patterns of extreme vigilance. Humans noticed this difference and used it. Approaches that once failed due to sudden flight now succeeded more often. Over time, this increased confidence and dependence on hunting rather than gathering alone. Gradually, the relationship between humans and animals shifted from negotiation to influence. People did not yet control nature, but they affected it. Regular hunting paths created predictable animal reactions. Repeated burning changed plant growth. The world became responsive to human patterns just as humans once responded to it. Still, at night, many sat awake longer than necessary, listening, waiting for sounds that no longer came. The silence itself felt unfamiliar. For their ancestors, silence often meant a predator approaching. For them, it meant the world had changed. And though they could not name it, they were living in the first generations where humans were no longer merely surviving the age of giants, they were inheriting its aftermath.